Howdy folks. So here's our MakiBox first print and setup and calibration walkthrough. So let's get started with that. Okay, so first step with connecting up the MakiBox, you've got two connections. One goes to the power and one goes to standard micro USB. And so make sure that's firmly plugged in, and then you power it on. Now, in the meantime, now this will depend on the system that you are running, but so for 5D print, under Windows, you'll need to check and see what COM port appears and manually put in a listing under the config file. But for Linux and Mac, currently it is not needed. In the future, we'll update everything so that it just automatically finds the correct COM port that's available. So activate 5D print. And that should bring up a browser, and if you're successfully connected to your printer, you should see this interface. Drop down the Z-axis a little bit, and then try homing X and Y. And then as a last step, home the Z. And with any luck, you're not going to be too far off on the height. Before we level the bed, go on and preheat the bed to about 100 C so that it's thermally stable before you do the leveling. And that will take a little while. So in the meantime, I think I will drop the bed down. And then we can show you how to load the material. So this is the extruder. So if I run the extruder, it does that. I'm going to turn the motors off. So I just hit the motors off button. So you take your spool. If you've got a standard size spool from us, it will fit on the back here on the spool rollers. You may want to make sure that you've got a clean cut on the end of your filament. If you see any dust or any other debris, oil, anything on your filament, don't put it through your printer. Bad things can happen. So trim up the end using a pair of side cutters or something. And then what you're going to do is the opening's just directly below the feed tube. So just fit it in right in there. And then you should be able to rotate it clockwise to get it started. And it should just go right up. Now, so we've already dropped the bed down, so I'm going to push the hot end out towards the edge. Now, you can feed it forward. There is a command line for load and eject, but it's a little bit buggy right now. So once you've got the filament started, basically this flange fits right in between these openings, and then the base of the flange goes on these two rollers. So it just literally just drops in place. Now, the tricky thing that you need to watch out for, one, make sure that your filament's reasonably tight on the spool. And then the other thing is make sure that the loose filament is not going to interfere with those rollers, because if it gets caught in the rollers, it can pinch. Okay, so I'm going to keep feeding. You can see that it turns the spool around automatically. And then turn around to the business end. Now, we've only got our hot end at 30 degrees C right now, so we need to heat it up to about 235 for this filament. So turn it on and wait for it to heat up. It shouldn't take too long. Now, currently the filament's right here. I prefer to turn off the motor and manually run it until it gets into the hot end, because sometimes it meets a bit of resistance going in, and you might want to just kind of slowly guide it in. So like right now it's there. So for production feed tubes, we're gonna change the design a little bit so that that should be a little bit easier. But you probably, with the current ones, you will have a little snap like that. Now we just changed this nozzle we've used before, so you can see it push purple out. And so if you're feeding it by hand, basically you just want to back it out a little bit after you're done. If you do it through the console, just back it out about 15 millimeters. So on FIDE, the default, it would be hit minus about 3 times and you'll be good. Okay, now back to initial calibration and everything. So generally what I do is I move the hot end to here, here, and here, and I tighten or loosen the screws on the bed in those areas as is needed. To start with, go on and kind of tighten the screws down a bit so that the bed is below the hot end on all sides. If this is the first time that you're doing this, be careful about setting the Z height until you know that it's going to clear. So manually moving it up. That's as close as it gets. So I'll go and home the Z, and I'll let it out a bit. Now, production ones, we're going to look at having a hole straight down through here, so it'll be a little bit easier to get at this angle. Now, once you've done this once, later on the calibration is usually not that much, so it's just kind of minor tweaking. So to start with, just get it to where you can easily get a business card underneath, and then we'll hit the positive Z, move it over to the next screw, and then home the Z axis again. So again, get it to where it's close, where you can easily get a business card, but it's not too far or not too close. Because go and do this one more time over on the far end in the middle. And then bring the Z back up. And then home it. Now this one, since the other two are already pretty close, you can get this one a little bit closer. So for me, I prefer to do it to where it just grabs the business card if you put it into it. You can try different settings, but it's roughly about the height that I go to. Now again, go back to the first one. And then raise or lower it until it just grabs that business card. Now, the calibration process is basically the same if you have the polycarbonate bed. Main difference is that you don't need to heat it up before doing the calibration. Okay. Like I just lost contact with the machine, so this is alpha software. So let me just restart 5D print. Homing the X and Y. Turn the hotbed back on. And we were about to go over this one, and set the Z. And it's still loose, so do it until you just grab the card. Now, if you think that, so basically we went around to each point twice. Now it should be level and calibrated to the right height. To double check, you can go into the middle, home the Z, and again use your card to check the height. So it should just grab it a little bit. And then it's not bad to go back to your different points and double check. So in this instance, looks like we actually want to raise the end a little bit. Okay. Now, should be ready to go, so I'm going to load up our calibration cube. And run it. Now it looks like this is the third pre-production beta that we put together. Looks like the Z-axis is tending to kind of tilt a little bit, so we'll have to see how this runs. We may need to kind of calibrate it at a slightly different place to get it in the right area. Because it looks like when it starts pushing it back down, it actually tilts up a bit. So we've done a quick fix to keep the table stable this way, in and out. So it is very stable that way, but it puts a bit more friction than it's designed for on the other bits. But then the other bits on the pre-production, the tooling has a little bit more room in it, so it allows for that movement. And it's heating up the hot end right now. So it's gotten the bed temperature up, and now it's heating up the hot end to working temperature, and it will start the print as soon as it's done that. And on our default G-code settings, we run a little bit of filament. So the popping you hear looks like the bed's a little bit too closely calibrated. So I just, by hand, moved it down a little bit more. And then looking at sorry, I'm trying to get this into frame. Hold on. Okay, so I need to find the macro setting for this, but anyway, basically it looks like it's probably over extruding a little bit. So what I'm going to do is in 5D print, I'll modify the E-steps. So I just dropped them down to 144 steps per millimeter. We'll see how that Now, technically, we know how many E-steps are needed for each material, typically, with our machines. But at the same time, you do need to kind of look at the output and evaluate if you want to do more or less. Also, I'm not sure if this temperature is the right temperature for this material. I'm running a calibration cube that was set up for orange, and so it might run better at a slightly higher temperature, actually. Try adjusting the extrusion temperature. Now I'll just let this print run until it's finished. So this is literally the first print from this printer. I just put it together in about an hour and a half. I haven't changed any settings in the default firmware or anything. No oil, no grease, anything to lubricate stuff. And this is again, the pre-production tooling. So there's a little bit of looseness in the mechanism and everything. So like there you're seeing it has a little bit of play in it, which it shouldn't have. Just tightening this down a bit. So with the production one, we've modified the tool to take up these, that slot. Okay, so the top came out kind of weird since I was messing around with it, but there you go. Okay, so very first print, no calibration or anything. So obviously the top couple of layers are out of whack because I was adjusting it in mid-stride. It's not too bad though. There's at least one place that it skipped, which is where I think the extrusion temperature might be a little bit low on that file. But other than that, it looks not too bad for a very, very first print. Awesome. All right. MakiBox. 2 hours from box to print. Pretty awesome.